Shalom and blessings, my dear friends. May Adonai's blessing be upon you as we go through the fifth part of our teaching, Blueprints to Redemption and Transcendence. May Adonai's inspiration fall on you. May his light, may his encouragement, may his blessing, may his energy, and may his favor and may his miraculous power surround you and lift you up as we go through this teaching. I must begin by thanking you all who gave me feedback, and I watch with great joy and fulfillment as the download numbers continue to increase and spread all over the world, different countries and so on, and the numbers in different countries are also multiplying. And I'm glad because I think that the multiplicity is also part of your effort. I think I like to think that you're putting the word out and you're sharing it with others, your friends. So thank you so much for doing that. And I want to thank those of you who connected me to thank me, to give me feedback on how much blessing the teaching have been to you. You know, one of the ways which the good Lord created the world is that how we get to know we are offering value is through reward. There's a saying in ancient Jewish wisdom, there's an instruction in ancient Jewish wisdom that you should never give someone work that doesn't have a purpose, that is work that has no reward. For instance, you can't just tell someone dig a pit and then the next minute you tell him fill up the hole again, or there's no purpose, there's no reward to that work. you know uh, Work has to have meaning, it has to have reward for it to be fulfilling and uplifting to the soul. If you do work and consistently do work that is not rewarding, that is not fulfilling, at some point it's going to erode and destroy or hurt your soul. And so one of the ways in which I find that I am doing something valuable here, because you could be doing valuable work and you could know that what you're doing is valuable, especially to those you're doing it to, but if you're not getting any form of reward for that work at an emotional or at a psychic level, you start feeling a sense of what for now, in order not to overcomplicate the issue, I would say resentment within you. You start feeling this dread, like for doing something that is it's the same feeling you get when you go out of your way and you do someone a favor, do someone a big favor and really do something good for them, and they just no thank you and no gratitude and no uh, uh, a sense of gratitude for what you've done for them or acknowledgement of the value you've offered them. It sucks, doesn't it? it it could almost make you feel bad about what you've done. Usually, sometimes we want to do good to people for the sake of the good that we are doing, for the sake that they need it. But when they reward us either with their gratitude or with their appreciation or with a material token, we feel different about what we've done, from when if they just ignore, didn't even say thank you, and just it's weary to the soul to consistently do good things to people who behave like that, isn't it? That is just the way the good Lord has created us to to function, that we get more energy, we get revived and revitalized through reward from the efforts we put in into the world. If you plant seeds in the ground and nothing comes out, it's disappointing, right? And so I want to thank those of you who got me appreciation, thank you, gratitude, tell me the things you learn and how it is impacting your life. That is enough reward for me. And then there was one of you, and I really appreciate you so much. I didn't even know you're listening. Like when I put out these things, I don't know who exactly downloads and listens unless you get to me, but I see the numbers. I see where someone is downloading from. I see how many times people visit the portal to download. But unless you get to me, I don't know specifically who is listening. And there's one of you that I didn't even know you were listening, and you got to me to tell me how much it's been a blessing to you, and you even said you gave a financial appreciation for what you've learned, and that is wonderful. I like that. It's part of what makes me feel and know that truly what I'm doing, putting the time, the energy, and the resource to do this, it's meaningful. And then one of you also shared with me a feedback that I really find to be so amazing, and I thought I would share it here with the rest of you. You know this part where we said that your actions doesn't make the results any less a miracle, that it, action is to act is a very powerful supernatural thing you could do. And so there's this brother, and he's out of country, and since he went out of country, he's been trying to land a job. And from what he told me, that he had talked to an HR of one company, that if there's a job and the HR say, okay, we're going to see, I'm going to look into it, and if there's any, we're going to let you know. And for a couple of weeks, he's been waiting and praying for things to happen, and of course, not just praying, and also putting effort. And he said to me that he was listening, and the aspect of us acting, of us doing our own part, and that and so on. And after which it just occurred to him, let him call the HR lady, and said that he's still waiting. And when he called the HR lady, and the lady said just to give him a moment, and not long, the lady sent an employment letter, and that is how he got a job that is relatively very good for people who just came into the country. So that's amazing. He acted. He didn't just sit and was praying. And like I've said, and as I was discussing the issue with him, I said that, for instance, God could tell you that, look, I want you to, I've given you a job at MTN, and go to MTN and drop your application, you'll be accepted. And then you go to MTN and you drop your application, and the manager tells you that no, nobody, you cannot be accepted, never, it's impossible. You don't have the credentials, you don't have what it takes to work here. There is nobody that works here that have the kind of qualification you have. You don't have enough to work in this place. Or you could give any other excuse, and makes it very clear to you that it is absolutely impossible for you to be accepted to work there. And then you go back disappointed that, well, but God told me that. And then you see the level of rejection you've received, and the roadblocks to it, and you might give up. But I said that even though God has said, and even if God said he was going to do it miraculously, you keep going there and insisting and being persistent doesn't undermine the fact that it is going to be a miracle, and doesn't undermine the fact that God is working with you. And so our tendency is to say that if it is God, is going to work, and you don't have to put all the extra effort and so on. So action is a very powerful thing. And even in the things that God has asked us to do, we got to act, and we got to be persistent, and we got to fight, and there'll be obstacles. And when there are obstacles, we have to pause, and we listen, and we readapt. We listen for new inspiration. We readapt. And there's also the issue that we got to be careful with, is that, I think I didn't say this last time, that God might tell us that, look, I want you to build a house. Now you just rush and you go and start gathering materials, and I'm using this as an example which could fit in any other thing, or every other thing. And you go out and start looking for materials to build a house, but what you don't know is the kind of house that God wants you to build. You might be trying to be a cement block house, but maybe God wanted you to be a stone house, and you don't know specifically the kind of house that he wants you to build. And maybe you start trying to build a cement block house, and then you discover that cement is expensive, and then you start meeting all kinds of obstacles. Then you ask, but how could God ask me to build a house? Doesn't he know cement is scarce at this time, and it's more expensive at this time? And then maybe if you pursed and listen, and then he tells you that, look, I really want you to build but a stone house. You see, inspiration comes in ballpark. And there's this stuff in ancient Jewish wisdom, in ancient Hebrew wisdom, in the scripture. It actually comes from a scripture where it says that we have to leave the milk of a sheep to seed for 8 days. Now, that we cannot kill an animal from his mother, that if a sheep has to have spent at least 8 days, a newborn sheep had to have spent at least 8 days with his mother before we can separate it from his mother to do whatever we want to do with the sheep. Now, I wasn't planning to talk about this, so I would have referenced, I would have referred to the scripture, and I would have given you the scripture, but I will share with you the idea. The idea is that we learn from there that when you have an inspiration, you should give at least 8 days to brew on it, to unpack it, to learn the details of it, and before you start acting. Because when you stay on it and allow it to brew, to mature, to form, you see that what you first of all initially thought when you have the inspiration might not be the action you take when you finally reaches the part of action. But there are some things that you act immediately and you could learn to tell the difference. Anyway, let's get into the things we want to talk about today. That acting the truth is one of the most powerful supernatural things you can do in this Olam Hasiyah, the world of actions. Is to act the truth. Our actions create more than anything else. Actions create powerfully, and this is the way the good Lord has created the world to function, that our actions create. When our actions are consistent with true reality, our actions create powerful reality in this world. Now, Romans chapter 8, verse 19 to 22, I'll read it out for you from the Modern King James Version. It says, "For the earnest expectation of the creation waits for the manifestations of the sons of God." It says, "For the creation was not willingly subjected to vanity." Now look at that word. It says, "For the creation was not willingly subjected to vanity." It says, "But because of him who subjected creation to vanity." Now, if there was an interpretation that I used to have back then, which I got it from wherever I got it from, that the person who subjected the creation to vanity is Adam, who sinned, and because of his fall, creation was subjected to vanity. And this word vanity is very interesting because if you read in Ecclesiastes, it says it's vanity upon vanity. It starts telling you about the vanity of the world. Now, you might think that one of our greatest purpose in life is to pursue happiness. But I really think at this point that our greatest purpose is to find meaning in life. And it is only within the context of meaning that we can find happiness. And meaning means to live in a world that is not vanity. It says everything under the sun, the book of Ecclesiastes, that everything under the sun is vanity upon vanity upon vanity. The Ecclesiastes is a very interesting book, and I think you should read it. You should really read that book. And that without meaning, without purpose, without a purpose that is transcendent, that is bigger and higher than ourselves, and that is transcends time, life can be vanity. And it says creation was subjected to vanity, not willingly. Means it was a forceful act. There's a force underneath which creation is subjected to vanity. And so it says that, but him who subjected it, who is that him? It's not Adam, it's God who subjected the world to vanity. In physics, it is called the law of entropy, meaning that there is a force in the world. In other contexts, you could call it spiritual gravity. There is a force in the world that is pulling strongly to pull everything down to corruption and to destruction and to vanity. If you, for instance, abandon your house and you don't care for it, you don't come back after a period and the house is all nice, or maybe even better. Things don't get better if you don't take care of them. They get worse, they get bad. Nothing gets, if this world is not cared for, it will disintegrate and it will go into tohu wavuhu, to chaos. You see, there is this talk about, oh, nature is beautiful, mother nature is wonderful, and we feel like nature in itself untouched is beautiful. No, nature is wild, nature is dangerous, nature is tohu wavuhu, until man steps in and puts order and puts life into the world through intelligent creation, intelligent actions, intelligent purpose and design. The world is a chaotic place. Nature is wild, very wild. Okay, now, so the law of entropy is that everything begins to disintegrate and go back and break and corrupt. If you abandon your car, you come after a while, the car would be rusted and getting bought and so on. If you allow a city in a number of years, the city will disintegrate. And that is the nature of reality. So God created this world, that the world cannot be stagnant, cannot just stay and just be itself. It continues to de-integrate. There's a word that I think will better explain the idea, but the word is keeping my mind at the moment. But let's go with de-integrate. The world will keep falling apart and falling apart and falling apart if there's no man there to push back on that force that subjects the world vanity, to push back on the chaos, to push back on the darkness, to push back on the spiritual gravity. If there are no human beings to push it back, everything turns to chaos, everything turns to tohu wavuhu, everything turns to darkness. Tohu wavuhu is the word in Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, where it says, and the earth was without form and void. See, so it says that creation was willingly subjected by God. God subjected creation to vanity, to meaninglessness, to vanity. By the way, the word there for vanity means empty, or means literally profitless. There's no point to life. You see, and it has to do with also idol worship, an idol worship, or vain, or something is vain, or vanity. You should read Ecclesiastes, and you could see that without God, and that is why belief in God is powerful, because it gives us the context for meaning in this world. If you take God out of this world, there is no meaning, there is no way to find meaning. Very brilliant philosopher or thinker, Nietzsche, he said that God, and he said that with a lot of trepidation and dread for what the consequences of that could be. And he said, God, it seems God is dead. Now, if there is no God, it means human beings who have to become, as Nietzsche speculated, who have to become the creators of their own meaning and purpose. And what would it mean for human beings to now have the responsibility to create their own meaning and purpose? And there is no evidence, as far as we can tell, that human beings outside the existence of God can create meaning and purpose in life. But that is a very complicated subject to go from. A casual look you could look at, and you think that, well, you don't need God to find meaning and purpose in life, and that there are many people that don't believe in God, but they're living a meaningful and a purposeful life. And I've told you before that just the fact that someone says they don't believe in God, but yet they are living based off on a system that is built based on belief in God, and they cannot extricate themselves from that system, because I'm beginning to go off track. Anyway, it says that so for the creation was willingly subjected in the hope. Why did he subject creation to vanity, to chaos, to entropy? It says that he did it in hope, in the confident expectation, and the belief, the hope, the confident expectation that the creation itself shall also be delivered from the bondage of corruption. You see, everything corrupts. Everything corrupts. There is a power that is corrupt, there's a power that God put in this world to corrupt everything. And that when human beings are there to push back that power, everything will become corrupted into chaos, tohu wavuhu, into formless and void and darkness, thick darkness covering everything. And so he says that he did it in the confident expectation, that is hope, that the creation also would be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. That in other words, the children of God will be the saviors of nature. Okay? Will be the saviors of nature. And there are people who think that we are the problems to nature, that human beings are destroying nature, that we just have to leave nature alone. And it is this claim, yeah, I think here I might now just jump in and talk about a promise I made to you, that I was going to tell you the real reason about the wildfires we are having today, the real cause of it. I'll tell you what the real cause is, then I'll tell you what the governments are saying the cause is, and then you decide, okay? And so, but let me finish reading the verse, because I don't think we'll come back to it. It says, it says, so that creation will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the liberty of the children of God. And who are the children of God? These are people who are following God's design for life. And it says, and we know that the whole creation groans and travails in pain together on and now. So creation is traveling in pains, is in pain, and creation needs you. It needs you to set her free from corruption, and this is God's design that you should be the one to do that. And if you don't do that, creation is in trouble. Creation would lash out in pain, and there will be problems for us too. Okay, now so let me tell you about that wildfire things, the Australia wildfire things. And I'm saying this now based off on the fact that people who claim that we are the problems, we are the ones destroying nature. Oh, nature is beautiful, mother nature is wonderful, and if we just get human beings out of the way, human beings destroy everything. We are cutting down trees, we are doing that, we are doing this. You know, a friend of mine, somebody I was talking with said to me that we are just cutting down trees, and is the problem global warming is because we are cutting down trees and so on. And I told him that, do you know that, as a matter of fact, there are more trees in the United States today than there were when Christopher Columbus went there and discovered that land? There are more trees in the United States today. Now, why am I talking about the United States? Is it because I love United States so much and I like to venerate it? No, that's not the point. The point, like I've said before, that it is very hard to get hard data about things here in Africa. I'd very much love to talk about the facts here in Cameroon, but my mind, the scientist in me will not want me to make claims that I don't have figures and the concrete facts about it. I could not just make facts based on anecdotal evidence. For instance, let me give you an anecdotal claim. They claim that the world today is more violent than ancient times. And you know, people have all these illusions that people in ancient times were just happy and peaceful and living in their herds and eating game and playing games at night. There was no corporate wars and there were no bombs and guns, and so the world was peaceful and nice. I mean, that is an anecdotal evidence that is so not true. The world today is less violent than it has ever been in the history of man. The more, and I mentioned it before, less people die today from the hands of other human beings than any time ever in the history of man. And these are matters of concrete facts. You gotta look at it. But if you just look at it anecdotally and see things casually, you could get to a lot of wrong conclusions. You see, and so there were no all good days. The good days were violent. They were terrible. Today they say that, oh, we are polluting the water, we are polluting the ocean. Do they know the miracle we have today called pipe-borne water? The miracle of the system, the plumbing system where we can have clean water. You thought that maybe the ancient people had dirty water, they had clean water, and then we are the ones who dirtied all the water. I mean, the ancient people didn't have good clean water, and maybe I'll talk about that in another lecture. I'll talk about the water crisis in the oldest, just as recent as 18th century, before the discovery of pipe-borne water. How you would think that in their time, when civilization or without industrialization and all that, you would think that maybe they had cleaner water and all that, but they had dirty water. Water was inundated with feces and all kinds of things. And imagine that there was no pipe-borne water. People have to laundry, and there were no there were no there were no toilets. I mean, it was a mess. It was chaotic. So the old good days were not good. And so if man is not creative, if man doesn't use the gift of creativity that God has given man, and if man doesn't use his creativity positively to care for nature, to care for the world, to dominate, and the word dominate has force, to dominate with force, to control and design and shape nature. Nature will eat us up. It will eat all of us all up, and there will be nothing left. It will kill us and destroy us. So those who are saying let's worship nature, let's leave nature alone, nature is beautiful, we are the ones destroying it, we should not control nature, that kind of fatalistic belief, that is also and one thing that environmentalism has in common this is one thing that environmentalism has in common with Islam: the belief that nature is pristine and holy and sacrosanct, and that to try to shape and tame nature is unholy. And so the environmentalists, okay, let's talk about the fires now. He says let's look at something. Back then, just as early as the 1950s, just as recent as the 1950s, when you had fires occasionally happen, and I mean big fires like that happen, not as big as today. When it happens, they put it out easy, no big deal. And just 1950s, but there were no devastating fires like we have today. Back, they were not. So why is this happening today? Why now? Somebody will tell you that, dummy, don't you know it's climate change? Well, is it? The real answer, I'll give you the real answer for sure. Wildfires are happening today because of bad management or bad ideas that are not real and are not true, or are not based in true reality. I'll explain. Now, in the 1950s, if you had a 10,000 acre, that's a 10,000 acre of fire, that was called a huge conflagration. That was a huge fire, 10,000 acres of fire. That was a huge conflagration back then in the 1950s. Do you know what counts? And what I've just said is 100% correct. It's a fact that if you had 10,000 acres of fire, or fire burning land mass of about 10,000 acres in the 1950, that was considered a huge, big conflagration. And that's a fact. It's correct, 100%. Nowadays, do you know what? Nowadays, listen to me. Listen to what I'm about to say. It might shock you a little bit. 10,000 acres of fire in the 1950s were called a huge conflagration. Now, nowadays, fires that are bigger than 100,000 acres, up to 400,000 acres, that is over 40 times bigger than fires in the 1950s. Fires of over 100,000 to 400,000 acres today is considered normal. It's normal. It's pretty normal. It's not even big fire. So you can imagine what counts as big fire today. So you can imagine the sheer magnitude of the California wildfires and the Australia wildfires and all the other wildfires that come from time to time. So what has changed? You tell me that, Bonfley, damn it, it's climate change. I think I posted something on Facebook and somebody responded, oh, climate change is real. And I couldn't help myself. I said, no, it's not. I think it was something about snow falling in one of the regions of Cameroon. And somebody commented that climate change is real. And I couldn't help myself. I said, no, it's not. Any abnormality that happens to the climate now, it's due to climate change. Climate change in the context of the philosophy of the environmentalist groups. So what really has changed? Well, I'm going to give you a true explanation of what has changed, and then you're going to decide for yourself what is truly the answer. Okay, you're going to decide. You're going to choose between what the government and the bureaucrats are telling us, that it's climate change that is causing all these things, or is it as I'm going to explain? No, that the problem, we are using case in point the California wildfires, that the problem is how the state of California, the bureaucrats and those agencies, environmentalist agencies that are wielding their power and their policies, is the things they're doing there that is causing that is the source of the big fires. You see, so and then you could decide what to think is true. And the same thing is true for the Australia fires. You see, okay. How do I approach this explanation? I want to be brief because I'm almost 30 minutes into this lecture and I haven't even begun touching on the things that I wanted us to talk about today. God, how do I approach it? From which angle? So, okay, the problem today is mainly due to a lack of management of the forest brush, that's the brushland, the grassland, due to a lack of management. And the reason of this lack of management is because radical environmentalist groups impose excessive regulations and unreasonable restrictions and controls on the ability to keep the land safe from wildfire. See, there are things that used to be done back then in the 1950s, right up to, I think, even as recent as the 1970s, to keep the land safe from wildfires. I think up to the 60s, there are things that used to be done. But now, because the things like what? Controlled burning. And even here, I remember back then when we were young with our parents as farmers, we used to do a lot of controlled burning. Every year, the controlled burning of huge forests and so on. But there was a time that the government, I know very clearly when the government made it an offense, even a criminal offense. I don't know if it was a criminal offense, but the government made it that it was punishable if you were caught burning a bush, and it was due to climate change. And there were a lot of things I remember so clearly, and I was young. And then we were no longer burning a farm. There were things that we used to do when we could no longer burn bushes and so on. They made it illegal. And so these are some of the things that there were no longer controlled burning being done. And so what happens is when you don't do that, a huge buildup of flammable fuels. As flammable fuels in this context, what we're talking about is dead wood, grass, dry grass brush under the forest, and because they're not allowed to burn it before. And then also, back then they also used to create fire breaks in the forest, in huge forested areas. What are fire breaks? They are roads that are constructed within forest areas. And these roads not only help to contain the fire in case there is a fire, it prevents fire from jumping, like when we say fire is burning at the left end of the road, it prevents fire from jumping to the other end of the road. Or at least, yeah, if you leave it, it will eventually jump, but at least it gives it time for the firefighters to fight off the fire before it has time to jump and burn large areas. And also the roads, or the forest breaks, the fire breaks, also give access for the firefighters with their machines and all that to access the areas. And then also the logging, that is cutting trees, also largely terminated, and a lot of timber management, all these things stop because of the environmentalists and so on. So there are no more fire breaks being done, no more controlled burning or clearing of the underbrush and all those things, and the timber management, all that gone, you see. And so these are the things that people used to do back then to save forests from huge conflagrations. But these things are not being done anymore, you see. And that is where you see how the problems come, that when a fire starts, you see, there's problem. Because it's simple that when you burn a large brush field, you use the fire to thin the fire, that it thins out the undercover brush, and that way you keep big fires away. See, these are the things. There used to be programs in California that are done to reduce the chaparral out of the California forest, and that used to stop fires from getting out of control. You see, and all these things. There are a lot of things. You could go do your own research, and you'll find that what I'm telling you is exactly true. But none of these things are being done anymore, and as a result, big fires like you won't imagine. And when you ask the governments, what did they say? They say the answer is simple: climate change. See, when their terrible ideas and policies produce terrible consequences, it's never their fault. It's never the ideas to be blamed. It is the fault of the weather. It is the fault of a mysterious, unseen power known as climate change. And the same thing is true for New Orleans. There was a flood in New Orleans that killed 1,800 people, 1,800 people. Now, you have to forgive me that I'm talking a lot about America. And like I mentioned, that the only reason I'm using America as a case point, a case study in most of my lectures, is because it is easy to get the figures, the hard facts, okay? And the things, the principles that I'm saying are true, the same for everywhere else, regardless of where you are, whether you're in Morocco or you're in Equatorial Guinea or you're in Cameroon or in Nigeria. The principles are the same. But I could use, and I'll be glad if some of you can bring me reliable figures about your country, about certain things in your country. I'll be glad to use them. I'll be really glad to use them. To get figures in Cameroon, and I have contacted ministries, contacted people to try to get figures about certain things. It's nearly next to impossible to get figures. And even you, when you get figures, how do you know how reliable those figures are? Okay, so yeah. So talking about New Orleans, that there were the flood there killed. There's a flood that killed. I think this happened was in 2000 and a couple of years ago, and killed about 1,800 people and destroyed properties in billions of dollars. Now, what was the cause of the flood? What was the cause? Mismanagement and corruption. The government officials knew that the flood prevention mechanism that was put in place was insufficient. Now, there were other parts of the world and even other states that were hit with floods, with natural incidents that were worse than what hit New Orleans, but they did not have property and lives destroyed like it happened in New Orleans. So what happened, the natural disaster that happened in New Orleans that killed 1,800 people and destroyed property in billions of dollars, happened in different places in the world, but didn't destroy or take lives, because those people built tools, built embankments and all kinds of infrastructure to prevent the flood from killing human beings. You see, there are times that if you hear about floods and certain things happen in areas like the Middle East, Islamic controlled areas where they don't Islamic belief, and it's changing because a lot of countries like Dubai, the Arab Emirates, they are buying into Western ideas, and one of Islamic ideas is the holiness of nature. You don't have to fight the will of God. If God, the wind is God, the flood is God, and if Allah wants to save us, fine. Now, well, let me not get it. My point is what caused the floods in New Orleans? The corruption. Corruption was the cause of it. The government officials were taking billions from the federal government in aid to build the flood prevention mechanisms, but the money was going to private pockets, and they knew that the instruments that they had built were insufficient, but yet they did not do anything about it. And there were reports that things should be done about it, but the government officials, they kept siphoning the money, and corruption was one of the huge corruption cases in the United States in years. And that is what killed people. And so nature will kill us all. When there is corruption, when there is foolishness, when we don't know how the world works, when we don't embrace the wisdom of God, His blueprint for reality, the flood comes and it kills us all. But when we embrace truth, and when we act out truth, when we apply our creative potential in the world, we keep back the chaos, we keep back the flood, and we save lives. Let's see. Ephesians chapter, we're talking about vanity. Let's go back to what we're talking about. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 17, it says, "These I say therefore and testify in the Lord, that you should not walk now on as nations walk, in the vanity of their minds." The vanity of the mind. This is something so powerful, to have a vain mind. You know, I said last time that scripture says not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. And I said that when I was recommending to you to follow the rules. And when I say follow the rules, follow the Creator's rules of life. Now, it's like two people want to start a relationship, two young people, and this is very common with young people today with their progressive ideas. They want to start a relationship. They don't study principles and self-evident truths that have stood the test of time about relationships. I mean, your lifetime is too short to figure out what works within your own lifetime. Your lifetime is too short. For how long are you going to be in a relationship to figure out what works in the relationship, to invent the wheel of relationships? Simply, you want to find what works, what has stood the test of time and has worked for millions and millions of people for thousands and thousands of years. And so we don't walk in the vanity of our minds. I wish I could have time to explain this, but that would completely take us off of that. And so don't try to reinvent the wheel. Learn God's principles for how the world works, First Corinthians chapter 1 verse 20. I want to read us something very interesting there. First Corinthians chapter 1 verse 20. Let me start from 19. It says, therefore it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. It says, where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world? See, the wisdom of the world, where the environmentalists and all kinds of smart ideas that we have about how we think the world should work. And like someone said, that when we wage a war with reality, reality ends up winning. Let's read something in the First Corinthians chapter 3 verse 20. First Corinthians 3 verse 20. Actually, let me start from verse 8. From verse 8, yeah. However, each will be rewarded according to his work, for we are God's co-workers. You see that? You are God's field, God's building. Using the grace God gave me, I laid a foundation like a skilled master. Okay, this is, let's go to verse 18. It says, let no one fool himself. If someone of you thinks he is wise by this world standards, let him become foolish, so that he may become really wise. See, the wisdom of this world sounds really wise. And I meet people every day that are so wise in the wisdom of this world. And what is the wisdom of this world? Because I have to also qualify that, because the wisdom of this world is, like I said, the environmentalists. That's an example, what we just talked about. And it's the wisdom of this world that is destroying the world. We reject reality. We reject the truth about how the world works, how the Creator created the world to work. We think that we can re-engineer reality. We can re-engineer the core mechanism. It says, for the wisdom of the world is nonsense as far as God is concerned, inasmuch as the Tanakh says, he traps the wise in their own cleverness. And again, Adonai knows the thoughts of the wise are worthless. You see. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 18. It says, for speaking out arrogant words of vanity, they entice by fleshy desires, by sensuality, those who barely escape from the ones who live in error. Now, these are all verses connected with vanity, connected with the vanity that has to do with not finding meaning and purpose. And it says that the world is subjected to vanity. And human beings, we are the ones to save the creation, and that is also for our own sake, from the vanity. And how we save creation is by replacing that vanity, that meaninglessness, that nihilism with purpose, a purpose that is so transcendent, that is so high and so true. It says, I was talking with a friend the other day, and I told him that I scarcely ever truly meet people physically, that meet in person, people who truly practice their truth. You see, and I knew that that statement sounds suspicious at first. So I said, these are the kinds of people I find. I find people who hold a lot of contradictory truths. You see, it's as a teacher, and there are times I give assignments to some of you that are in a Bible school. And even when I was teaching in the university institute, and a student will write an essay or something, and in the first paragraph they say something, and somewhere in the second paragraph they say something that completely contradicts what they said in the first paragraph. And by the time they are finished with their essay, they are about contradictions upon contradictions, and somehow it seems they don't even notice. And some of them, I sit and I talk with them. I say, you didn't notice that this contradicts what you just said over there. And I help them put their thoughts together. So what we find is that a lot of us have all these contradictory ideas. And somehow we practice all those ideas. And how we do that is because we compartmentalize our lives. You see, okay, today life demands that I act on idea A. And even though I hold idea A, B, C, and all of them are contradictory, but today life is only demanding me to act on A. And then tomorrow it demands me to act on B. And the day after tomorrow to act on C. The problem only comes when at a particular moment you have to act, life is demanding an action that will require me to choose between idea A and B. And that is when the problem of the contradiction, that's when the contradiction becomes a problem. So a lot of us compartmentalize, and it's that compartmentalization that makes us able to live with contradictions. And so that is the first. I meet people who their truth is so contradictory, self-conflicting, that if anybody was to take it truly seriously, in all honesty, it is impossible to practice. But yet these people practice it because they compartmentalize. And so they are living a very contradictory life. If you look at their life in a stretch, not as a photo, not as a snapshot of their lives. Snapshots don't tell the truth. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you saw two pictures. That is the picture of two couples that are so happy together and so holding each other and smiling, and they're having the time of their lives, and they're in deep love with each other. And you can look, oh, they're so happy. Now, what if someone said, well, but that picture don't, and you envy their lives from the photo, you envy their lives and you wish that you had their lives. Somebody said, but what if I showed you the video of what is really happening, and you watch the video, you discover that those two people, they are married to different people, and they both left their houses and they went to do what they're doing, and then after that photo, they're going to separate. The one goes back to his wife, the other goes back to their husband. It changes everything, doesn't it? The video. And so a lot of us sees photos of people's lives, photos of things, and we fall in love with those photos. But if we saw the video, we might not like them so much. Okay, so then I said the second set of people I meet are people who truly practice their teaching, but their teaching is, and they have been very successful to manipulate reality to suit the life they already have, or the life they desperately want to live. So these are people who grab on reality with the force of their minds, twist it with a wonderful, smart wisdom, that you take somebody that's truly wise to figure out the maneuver, the cunning that has been used to craft out this teaching that completely justifies and underpin the life they are living. So these people are living their teaching, but they have changed the teaching to conform with their lives. Rather than, I said, you meet people who truly stand somewhere and see a light so bright, so transcendent, so beautiful and huge and bigger than life and death, and they grab on it and change their lives towards that reality. Okay. And so I keep talking about action, and I don't want you to get all materialistic about it, that action is only something that is physical. Words also, it's a form of action. Wholesome speech. If you read the book of Proverbs, there's a lot of talk about wholesome speech. Wholesome speech, truthful speech. It's action. It has power. It creates. Now, I'm not talking about the teaching that say name it, grab it, name it, claim it, or call things that are not as though they were, and they would magically appear, or creating with words. That's not what I'm talking about. Now, I have said before that you should live your life based on the normal, right? Now, what is the normal between these two ideas? Let me tell you something from a personal experience. When I first stumbled across the idea that words create, and that just keep declaring it, keep saying it, and all that stuff, and whatever you decree will come to pass. There was a period of my life, over a period of 6 months, I spent 8 hours every week, non-stop. That was on Saturday because I was working. So every Saturday when it was my off day, I would lock myself up in my bedroom and I would set my timer. 8 hours I'll be confessing and decreeing the things that I wanted in my life. And then none of that did the wonders that I expected them to do, the wonders that I expected. And believe me that when I remember one day I said something, and somebody said to me that, oh, don't say that. Don't you know that words have power? Words create. And I said, well, if words were that powerful, that this one thing that I've just said that in your estimation is negative, all the amazing things that I said about my life, why aren't they now? Does it mean that if I said to myself, if I said something, think of any of the negative things you could say, that a believer in this thought system would tell you not to say them. Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. Words are powerful. Can you start declaring now that you'll be the next billionaire in the world in 2025, and that will happen? You see, so, and I'm not saying that there's no truth in that. I'm not saying that that system of thought is useless. I'm saying that it works on the exception. It's not the rule. The rule is that the proper use of speech, the proper power in speech, and the normal power in speech that can truly transform your life is to learn how to communicate with people, to talk with people, to use words, to use words to reach out to people. See, you could declare 24 hours 7 that you'll be the next biggest thing in town. But if you're rude, if you use your words in a cutting way, and if your voice, how many when was the first time you heard your own voice? The first time I heard my own voice, I think that was sometimes in 2014. Yeah. No, sorry, in 2002. And I said, goodness, is that how I sound? That I was it was recorded on an audio cassette. It was a teaching I was giving, and then the teaching was recorded, and I was listening. I couldn't believe I was the one. That was, I think, about the first time I heard my own voice. The way you hear your voice in your ear is not the way others hear it. Others hear your voice different, because when you are speaking, your bones vibrate, and then you hear your voice with your internal ears. It sounds different from when someone else is hearing your voice from the external without the bone vibration that you are experiencing as you speak and all the other things. When you speak, your bones vibrate. There are a lot of vibration in your body, and that changes the way your voice sounds to you. Now, if you want to know how your voice sounds to others, record your voice and listen to it. That's really how others hear your voice. Okay? You use a good, and now with the smartphones and all this voice recording, most of us now know how our voice sounds. Now, this is the thing you want to know. Does your voice, what vibe, and when I say vibe, I'm not talking about some gooey, transcendent thing. Does your voice ooze out creativity, energy, enthusiasm, love, compassion? What is your voice sending out? Now, there are times I talk to people, and the way their voice sounds, the way they are speaking, they sound aloof, they sound all this kind of, they sound inattentive, they sound scattered and uncoordinated, and so on. Now, you want to learn to communicate, you want to learn to have a warm voice, you want to learn to be someone that communicates well. And there are a lot of things about speech in the book of Proverbs. You want to learn that first and apply all that to your life. And then when that happens, maybe one day you will decree something and it will come to pass. But don't build your your whole life and your whole hope based off on the idea that your words can create with the same magnitude of power, more or less, and probably less, as God creates, as God says, let there be tree, and trees were, and let there be light, and light words. And then you say, oh, let there be money in my bank account, let there be opportunities. I'm not saying these things are not true. I'm not saying there's no reality in that, but those are exceptions. What you want to learn is how to speak in a way that makes you sound truthful, and not because you're truthful. You want to learn relationships, how to relate with people, because relationships are literally forged with words. Every marriage, unless in those weird scenarios where people start in a bar and they're drinking and they start expressing themselves with their body not with their mouth. Words. Every relationship, what will be a marriage, starts with words. What will be a business partnership starts with words. What will be the story I told you about this brother, he got the job through words. He picked up the phone and called the HR. Words. With words. Words create. And how words create is through social interaction. You got to learn the right thing to say, how to say it. And since this is not a teaching, you could read the book of Proverbs. It's a good place to learn about truth, how to use speech, truthful speech, and how to speak in a way that it brings life. And that is what it means to build on the normal. And if you can get this right, if you can learn to communicate right, then maybe just one day you might decree a thing and it comes to pass. See, I have had people, I have known cases where people lose opportunities only because they opened their mouths. And they needed to open their mouth to have the opportunity, but when they opened their mouth, they didn't say the right things, or they said the things wrongly, and that caused them to lose opportunities that they could have gotten. And your mouth, your future, your destiny is in your mouth. And when I say it is in your mouth, it's not in the sense of the supernatural. It's in the sense of simple natural social interaction. How you interact. Simple thing, gratitude, expressing gratitude, how you express gratitude, and all those kind of things. You got to learn the etiquette of social interaction. Yeah. Okay. So, faith, believe in God. Now, last week I gave an example about the electricity, the bulb and the switch. Okay. And then I also gave an example. I gave an example about the bulb and the switch and the smartphone. Now, you could use a smartphone very well without knowing the least thing about how a smartphone works. You could use your electric system in the house without knowing the least thing about electricity. Turn on your switch, turn it off. That's all you need to know. But the moment that knowledge, the moment the handicap of not knowing at least a basic about how these things work becomes a problem to you, is when this thing develop problems. For instance, I remember back then I paid sometime around 2014 or 13, I paid 5,000 francs to have my phone, to flash my Android phone. Now I can flash my Android phone myself in less than 10 minutes in my house. But I have no clue back then how to do that. So the consequence of not knowing at least the basic about how these things work is when these things develop problem, then you realize that you have no clue. Have some of you that have mothers and parents, have your mother ever given you her phone, your mother or your dad, her phone that has a problem, and it was a pretty simple problem to fix? Because as long as everything is working well, you can get by with a lot of ignorance. But as long as things are not working well, and as the world it is a broken and a fractured world, there is a price, and it's not a good price to pay for ignorance. There's a price for not knowing the simple basic of how the electricity system works. Now, I'm not saying electricity system to be specific. If you're electricity, I'm talking about spiritual things. Spiritual things, I'm talking about how life works, about how life, about what will bring you true fulfillment and maximal satisfaction in life. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't know that basic about how it works, you cannot get by. You will pay a price at some point, because the world is not functioning as it should. And so you need to know the little maintenance. You need to know at least to an extent to be able to carry on maintenance in your life. Maintenance in your relationship, because even if you marry the most wonderful person in the world, you will need maintenance at some point to maintain that relationship. As a matter of fact, life as it is a lot of maintenance work. And for you to do any form of maintenance, you need knowledge. You need more knowledge than just turn on the switch, turn it off, die the blue button and to call, and die the red button to stop the call, and so on and so forth. And that is why I am bringing you this knowledge, to show you that, to show you beyond the knowledge of turn off the switch, turn off the switch, so that you can fix things up in your life, in your relationships, in your finances, in your business, in every area of your life. And you can push back the chaos and live a life that is maximally fulfilling, meaningful, and satisfying. Abba, I pray that you bless this person that has just listened to this lecture up until this point, to this message from heaven that you put in my heart, that you bless them and you pour your favor and your inspiration upon them, baptize them with your inspiration and your strength, and open new doors for them, open their eyes, and give them the wisdom, the discernment, and the supernatural strength to rise above the mountains and the obstacles that stand before them. And may the darkness flee, and may the chaos flee, and may the tohu wavuhu be overcome with your rock, with your light, and with the creative order. Thank you, Abba. Amen. Okay, let's continue in the feed part. Now, we usually release this thing as a couple. So normally I thought that instead of just teaching for 2 hours straight, I'll do every Monday in this series, only in this series, I'll do 2 hours but 2 separate teachings. So see you in the next part B of this one, which is the seed part, or 5B. Okay, all right, shalom.